Today in our 2011 Chevrolet HHR, we're going to take a look at and show you how to install the Roadmaster InvisiBrake supplemental braking system. This is part number RM-8700. What we'll do is just simply pull that breakaway switch out of the front, and we want to see the system activate. We'll want to ensure that it's pulling straight down on our brake pedal, that all of our connection points are holding nice and solid. And we'll also want to be sure when we put our breakaway switch back in that it releases fully. All right, now we want to begin by getting our box mounted into position. We want to have it so that our adjuster here is readily available. I'd like to be able to at least glance at your gauge, which is going to be here on the back side, which we should be able to see from down in this area. That's something we don't use a whole lot. Once it's set up, it's ready to go. So I think the convenience factor of having it a little bit further in is going to give us more foot room back here. So I think the convenience factor is kind of going to outweigh the issue with getting in there and seeing to adjust it. All right. So we'll get our location marked out here. You can see we're going to use longer self-tapping screws than what are provided with the kit. That's going to allow us to get through the carpeting and installation in this particular application. We'll slide our box up there. We slide our tab right underneath our bolt. And at this point, I'm also going to put a zip tie kind of right underneath like that, so my screw in that front side is actually going to hold it in place there. That's what we're going to use to mount our cylinder to. All right, you see, nice and secure. And we'll bring our air cylinder in, and we want the cable just to go kind of out the driver's side door there. Our air inlet's going to be right there, so we'll want that to be facing up. All right, just pull that down so it's nice and secure. All right, now we're ready to start thinking about where our cable's going to go, getting our pulley and stuff like that mounted. To get it from under the seat there up towards the front, we're going to just pop off the scuff panel that sits right in here. Let's get it out of the way. See, that's going to kind of loosen that up a bit for us to where we can run our wires in and underneath there, run our cable in and out of there. And then we're also going to take this kick panel off the side here. That needs to kind of slide down underneath that hood latch, and then you'll just see really just held in by these two fasteners right in here, and right here. Now we can get our cable tucked in underneath that rear panel here. Now we're just going to follow right up along here. And right up in this area. So you've got a nice metal surface on that back side we'll be able to connect to. All right, now we're ready to kind of clean out some room here so we can get everything mounted nice and solid. You can see all this insulation. That's not going to give us a very solid mount. We know that we want our pulley to be somewhere in this area, located right behind our pedal, in line with its direction of travel, so it should be just about level. It moves pretty level, you can see. So we'll have to make a small notch in our carpet here. Clear that out. We'll see this behind it. Let's go ahead and start taking that out as well. Now we can grab the keeper for our cable. Looks just like that. See, the end of our cable here has got a little notch that's going to fit right over it. And that provides the anchor point for the end of our cable, and it's going to allow this to move in and out and operate our brakes. And we want to get that attached securely. Should give us an appropriate angle to our pulley, and from our pulley up to our pedal. All right, now here's a really good look at our configuration here for the pulley system that runs to our pedal. We've got our clamp here. We've got the catch on that clamp faced towards the firewall. You can see just a couple of bolts that are going to tighten that down. Now these tabs that stick out past the pedal, we're going to be cutting those off. But basically we want this cable, you can see it's going to run in a straight line from the back of that clamp directly to the top of that pulley. Nice and level and straight right here. Even when your pedal's depressed, it's when you want to see it the most. And then from there, if you look from our cable, we've got a straight line that runs directly up to that pulley. That's very important. We don't want to be pulling side to side on our pulley. We don't want to be pulling down on our pulley. We need our cable to run straight. And where it comes out of our cable housing here, or sheathing, we want that to be nice and straight. So experimentation is really what it takes. You can see here it took us a couple tries to get it right where we wanted it. We want it to be pulling straight out of the end there so we don't have any excess wear here. Straight on our pulley so we don't have to worry about it hopping off. And then as low as possible on our brake pedal to keep it nice and secure. Now we ran that right down on the steel. We don't want to be securing this to carpet or anything like that. And what we'll do is just when we lay our insulation back on, we're going to trim it out. We're going to make sure that we have a nice groove through here, and then that should keep that cable underneath our carpet. Now when properly adjusted, we should be able to pull our cable toward our brake pedal and just see that ball sticking out of the end. That gives us that little bit of wiggle room to make sure that our braking system is going to operate properly, but not when we don't want it to. Now here you'll see the notch taken out of that insulation material to give our cable plenty of room. And then once we lay our carpet on top, looks like it should be fine. Doesn't look like we're going to have any real interference to speak of. And even if our cable does hit our carpet a little bit there, it won't necessarily be a big deal. All right, now it's time for us to start passing our airline tubing, passing our wiring from outside the car in or inside the car out, whichever way it needs to go. We're going to come right up underneath this pad here. And right up here we're going to find a grommet. Now there's our major wiring loom that passes through there, and also a cable, and also our hood release cable. So we don't want to do any damage there, but in between those two, we've got a pretty soft area in that grommet. So we're going to use that to pass our items through. I'm going to start by taking a knife. We're going to cut just a small slit in that. We want to avoid the wiring in that cable, of course, but we want to get a little area cut in there so where we can pass through our, what we're going to use is our 1/4-inch airline tubing that comes with our kit. This is going to have to go through the firewall anyway. Might as well put it to use while we've got it. All right, that went through, so let's go out there to the underhood area. All right, so we'll pull our airline tubing up here. I want to pull plenty through, that way I've got enough to work with. And we need to take our 4-prong plug and also our monitor wire for our coach and get those passed through inside. So to get these inside, we'll start with our monitor wire here. Just going to wrap them up with some electrical tape. And then just in behind that, I'm going to add my 4-pole plug. Now we want to try to make this as streamlined as possible, so you might have to do a little creative taping, but I'm going to make it so that it'll separate that grommet on its own and pull through rather than getting stuck there. Kind of something like that, where the kind of help it to slide through there. All right, now let's go inside and see if we can't get it to come through. All right, now we'll pull it down through. Want to be sure not to pull our airline all the way through. And we'll get this big wrap of tape off here. We'll start pulling through our breakaway wire, pull through our monitor wire. And you will want to check out underneath the hood just to make sure it's coming smoothly and it hasn't hung up on anything. Now we're just going to bring in enough of the 4-plug to where it'll reach our control box under the seat. All right, then you'll see our little 6-pin plug here. This needs to go from inside of the vehicle out. We want this bare end to go out. So again, we're just going to use that airline tube, tape it to it, pull it through, and we'll be ready to start making some connections. All right. All right, now I'm going to grab some zip ties. Just kind of start zip tying our wires and our airline off where it comes in. We're going to run this right down the driver's door sill, with the exception of, like we talked about, we're not using this monitor wire back there. This is going to go up here. But you'll see if we pull down on this panel here, you can really run it right along there and then get it tucked down here. Should be a great spot for it. It'll be out of the way. Just going to kind of leave these loosely secured for now. That way if we want to pull out any slack or anything like that, we can. Right down along this edge. And then we'll go through that same area we ran our cable earlier. Go down under our seat area there. Let's pull them through from the back. Now before we get our wires in the way here, let's take care of these air connections that we need to make. We're going to grab our small 1/8-inch airline. Want to make sure we've got a really good clean cut to that. One end of it needs to be slid right into our air cylinder. When we push that in far enough, we shouldn't be able to pull it back out. We should get it connected there. And then we can trim that up. And then the other end needs to slide into the push to connect fitting on our InvisiBrake control box. So right from there, right into our air cylinder. All right, next we'll take care of our 1/4-inch airline tubing. What we're going to do is trim that off, and you want to make sure that you've got enough left under the hood. We've still got about 3 feet left up underneath the hood. So we'll trim that off a little bit shy of where we want to make our connection. Then we can slide in one of the smaller pieces of the tubing. Slide that right on there. See, I've got it in about that far. That should give us a plenty good connection there. And then that gets slid right on that fitting coming out of our box. Next up, we've got the plug from our breakaway switch and our power source. That plugged in. And then we've also got our 6-pin connector. We'll slide in right there. I'll just take up the slack out of our wires here. All right, now the only wire that we're not really going to be able to trim off is going to be the wires that come from the breakaway switch. So I'm just going to loop these up and zip tie them off here with the rest of them. All right, that should keep them out of the way. Now we'll finish heading up towards the front and finishing off those zip ties we started with our wiring. All right, then we can get our kick panel and that put back into place over here on the outside. We'll also put our scuff panel back in. Now we looped our towed vehicle's wiring up here because we knew we'd have to make the connection with the InvisiBrake, with the control box on the InvisiBrake. So this lets us make our connections right up here, be easy to get to. Now since it is going to be out underneath the hood and not inside the vehicle, we're going to use heat shrink butt connectors to make all of our connections. Part number is going to be DW05745. Now we're going to leave a little bit of excess here just in case we ever need to make any changes, or maybe we do something wrong here and we need to go in and fix it. So I want to have a little bit of extra slack, but I don't want so much slack that I'm not going to be able to kind of tuck it away and hide it. So just keep that in mind. It'll give us plenty of slack there. All right, so now we've got 3 ends. Let's get these peeled apart. It's just a matter of, there's a clear kind of a wrap around them. Just gonna get them separated here. Now we want to strip back all the ends. Now we're ready to start connecting them together. I'm going to connect my towed vehicle wiring with the InvisiBrake wiring here. Just basically using butt connectors to create a splice. And then that's just going to go to the green wire from the front of the vehicle, or from the plug-in from our RV. All right, now that's going to take care of our green, our yellow, and our brown. We're just doing straight connections, connecting the 2 wires together, 2 yellows to the 1, 2 browns to the 1, 2 greens to the 1. Now, where our ground comes in, this is going to be just a little bit different. We're going to connect 2 whites together, just like we normally would. But on the other side of our butt connector, we want to grab a little bit of that extra white wire off of that 4-pole. Twist it together, and we're going to use just a little piece of it here to make a jumper for our ground. There's nothing really different in that connection to any of the other 3, except for we just added a little piece of extra wire coming off one side. All right, now we'll grab our heat gun or little mini torch or lighter, whatever you've got handy, and let's get these connectors all shrank down. All right, now we're going to be using a ground stud located right here. This is going to be a factory ground. Can't get much better than that. And to make that connection, we're just going to be using a ring terminal. Now, while we're taking care of grounds, the black wire that was connected to the Breakaway, it also needs to go to a ground. I'm not going to need all this wire, so I'm going to trim some of it off. Let's separate that black wire from it. Let's get a ring terminal put on it, and we'll connect it at the same spot here. I like for all my wires to kind of follow the same path. That way it's a little easier to tidy them up. All right, now we'll use our 13mm socket. Just want to take that nut off of our ground stud there. We're going to put our ring terminals on it, and then just re-secure it. All right, now that should take care of the requirements that we have for our system. We want to have a ground from our wiring in the front. We need to have a ground for the box itself, and then there should be a ground in the rear of the vehicle. Now, to take care of the plumbing, we need to get to the vacuum line that's coming off of our brake booster. Right down here to the left of the master cylinder is the outlet. There's a little hose clamp there. We're going to try to work that down. Just kind of grab it with a pair of pliers. I'm going to wiggle it a little bit. You'll see if we pull down on that, we'll be able to separate it. And then if we pull out from the front side here, we're going to have good access to it. That way we'll have plenty of room to work on it here. slide my clamp off for now. I need to cut back the sheathing a little bit here. It's going to allow us to get in there and actually make our connection. All right, you can see we've got a couple straight sections here. Those are going to be perfect for doing what we need to do. So we get that little fitting right there. I'm going to come closer to the brake booster from there. Make a nice clean cut. And we'll slide our check valve in, the red side of it facing toward the engine. There should also be arrows on there that indicate, and we want those arrows to point toward the engine. Place that on there. Make another cut in the next flat part there. T needs to go in. That goes up on the booster, so we'll want it pointed about like that. Then we're going to take the small provided piece of tubing, just like what we used on our control box. It slid on there. Now we can pass that back through where we got it out of. Let's get that hose clamp put back on there. Now we'll put that tube right back up on the brake booster. Then we'll want to move our clamp up there and secure it. Now I'm going to run my Airline tubing. Kind of keep it down and out of the way. We'll trim off our excess on that. And we need to fit it right into that tube that comes off of our T. And we'll want to make sure it goes down in there a good ways, about an inch, inch and a quarter maybe. All right, looks like that's going to be down, out of the way, somewhere safe. Now to begin the installation of our brake light switch, which is required in this application for the InvisiBrake, we want to install the switch into its bracket. I'm going to leave it at its shallowest setting, and then we can adjust with this nut here on the back how far out that's going to stick. As we turn this, it'll allow that switch to come further and further through that bracket, allowing us to fine-tune our adjustment. But before we get this all the way up underneath our dashboard, I want to take care of getting it kind of pre-wired here. So let's strip both leads coming out here. Let's take a couple of the supplied blue butt connectors and slide those on. Get them crimped down. Now my monitor wire, I'm just gonna kind of get a rough figure on how much of that I'm gonna need. I'm gonna clip it off, and we'll strip it back and attach it to one of those butt connectors. The other side, it's gonna go to the length of wire that has the 10 amp fuse holder included. All right, got our pre-wires taken care of here. Now the bracket is going to mount on a stud. You can see the hole right here that's right up kind of just above the steering column. See it sticking out right here. Let's slide our bracket into position on it. Now we'll take our flat washer, slide it on just behind our bracket there. Also our lock washer, and then our provided nut. Now we want to use a 13mm ratchet. Just start tightening that down a little bit. Tight enough to where it's kind of tough to move, but not so tight that you can't move it. Now here you'll see our switch functioning properly. As we press our pedal, you're going to see that plunger that comes out. As we release the pedal, we want that to fully retract that plunger, push it all the way back into our switch. Ours is sitting right where we want it, but we can use these nuts to adjust that if necessary. To power that brake light switch, or to give it the voltage it needs to send our signal up to our LED in our coach, what we're going to do is use the power wire that comes from our InvisiBrake box. This is a 20 amp power wire. We're using a 10 amp fuse, so we're in good shape there. Just need to separate it from that black wire. And to do that, you'll either use a utility knife or something small. You just barely want to kind of go right in between them. You don't want to cut into either one of them. All right, I'll let us kind of like spread that out a little bit. Let's trim that wire. Remember, we don't have this hooked up to any kind of power as of yet. Something we're going to do as our last step in our InvisiBrake install here. But we are going to strip both ends of that back. Strip the end of our brake light switch wire, like that. Now to make our connections, we're going to be using a butt connector splice technique here. So I'm just going to take a larger butt connector and slide that on. I want to make sure it goes over both of my wires there. Then I'll just have to crimp that down. And then we can slide that over this side of the wire, and that'll make our continuation for us. And we'll just pull on each of our wires to make sure they're good and secure. Now we use a couple zip ties and tidy up our excess. All right, now that fuse holder will be located somewhere we can find it if we need to, but out of the way enough so if we don't, we won't have to see it all the time. All right, now with everything connected, it's time to make the last step here and get power going to the system. So this is the red wire that we separated from the black wire, which is part of that breakaway switch harness. So just strip the end off of it there. And slide our fuse holder down on it. Then we need to make a crimp right here. All right, nice and easy way to make our connection. See our 20 amp fuse secured to it. We'll set that aside until after we get it connected where we want it. Now we're going to this front stud right here. This is a power block stud. Use a 1/2 inch socket there. Loosen that up. And you can see the attached ring terminal is going to slide right down over it. And then that flange nut's going to go down and secure it. Tighten it back up there. It's going to open up our fuse holder. Place our fuse down and in. We're going to push it together to where we hear that click. Then we can make a little loop. We can secure that off right there. Again, so it'll be out of the way, but easy to get to. All right, now that's pretty much going to take care of the plumbing and wiring situation here on our vehicle. What we're going to do now is just take some time, bunch of zip ties, just get everything kind of tidied up. Get it all nice and secure to itself. We do want to keep in mind when we are setting our car up for tow mode that the HHR does require the use of a fuse master. We'll be doing a video on that here shortly, so there should be one online for you to look at and know exactly which fuse to do it on. But I just wanted to give you that heads up. Now in order for the system to work properly, there's a fuse that we have to pull for the HHR to go into towing mode. So what we're going to do is pop out this panel, and we're actually going to be using a bypass, which will basically just be like a switch that we can flip when we want to go from tow mode to non-tow mode. Now what we're looking for is the number 8 fuse, which is going to be from the top right corner. It's the third one down. It's going to be a small 2 amp fuse, ignition switch, Passkey 3+. That's our area, fuse number 8. We'll just get that guy pulled out of there. We'll set that fuse aside, get our fuse bypass. I want to pull the connectors right here off this back side of it. We'll need to take the little nut off the back. And then we want this to pass through our panel here in a safe area. What I mean by safe areas, we certainly don't want it to go in and hit anything. We don't want it to kind of take any of the information off of our door. So it looks like kind of in this area would be a good spot. Really doesn't have much going on behind it. So I think right in there should be a pretty good location. Take a 3/4 inch hole saw and we'll want to cut that out. Get our switch threaded in or pushed in, whatever works for you. On the back side, let's thread our nut on there. Now we don't need a tremendous amount of force on here. Just torque it down enough to where it gets a good hold. Plug our connectors back in. Our 2 amp fuse is going to go in the holder that's on the bypass here. Pop the cover on there. And then we need these to go in where the fuse came out. Again, needle nose will come in handy here. All right. Now we'd always want to just kind of coil that. We can put our panel back in place. Now inside of our coach, we want to get our monitor light installed. This is going to notify us if the lights in the towed vehicle are activated. That's important because if it comes on and if we're not hitting the brakes, well, we've got a problem. The other small item you see here, this is a warning signal. This gives us a little bit of a tone. Now we're installing this underneath the dashboard and there's just unfortunately not a ton of room for the camera and everything else, so it might be difficult for you to see, but what we want to do is tie our 2 red wires together, the one coming from the signal and the one coming from our light, and then this needs to go to the monitor wire. Either we're using the provided wire and running it all the way from the back of the coach up here and using a jumper wire, or like we did, we're using the brake wire that's on our RV plug that comes up underneath the dashboard here. We're going to be using part number 3035S. It's going to give us a plug-in here on our Ford chassis. This is a Thor Hurricane with the Ford chassis. It's going to give us our plug-in underneath the dashboard, and then we'll be able to pick up using the blue wire, that signal, and then the white wire, that's going to provide our ground. Now our ground, that's going to be on our signal and on our light, and that's going to be our white wire. So we're going to be connecting 2 reds together and then to our blue wire, then our 2 whites together and then to our white wire, in case you can't see it. Now when choosing your light location, you want to put it somewhere that's going to be easily visible as you're traveling. In our case, we're just going to go right down here on the dashboard. It's a solid surface and there's no wires or anything behind it. You always want to check, no matter where you pick, that you don't have any wires or anything behind it you might do damage to. We're going to drill a 5/16 hole. We're going to take a little bit of rubbing alcohol and clean off around that area. And then if you decide to, you can take your sticker and put on the back. Indicates Roadmaster, brakes are on, and towed car when lit. Now since it is so tight in there, we really won't be able to reach up and get to those wires. What I'm going to do is take one of our provided butt connectors here. I'm going to crimp that to each side. Now since we're not using our jumper wire that came with our kit, I'm going to recycle it and use it for the wires to help extend the wiring on our light here. Now they're going to look the same, of course, because it's the same wire we just cut in half. So on one end I'm tying a knot. See, that one's got a little knot in it. Help us tell them apart. The knot side I'm going to put to my ground side here. The other side will go to our red wire. Then we'll just pass that through our hole. And I just push our light right down there until it's nice and solid. And then we're going to use the small speed nut and we're going to push that right on the back of the light. So we'll have to pass our wiring through. We'll push that all the way up to the back of the dash so it'll hold it nice and securely. Now, located right on the side of our steering column and behind our brake release lever, there's going to be our brake controller plug. Now, we're going to be utilizing this plug, like we said, for that brake controller wire that comes from the back. It's on a little clip there. We'll just pull it off. We can take part number 3035S and plug in. Now, the S is going to have the bare leads here on the end. If you want to put a brake controller in, you can use 3035-P. That's going to have a plug on the end that fits a lot of common brake controllers. I'm just going to slide that in now. You want to squeeze it until you feel that little click. Now, the two wires we're going to be using are a white wire. That's going to make our ground, and our blue wire here, that's going to make our breakaway signal or our brake activation signal. So the black wire and red wire, just going to tuck these down and tape them out of the way. All right, now that we've got our light in place here, we've got our pigtail in place, let's connect to the ground side. Our signal here. I'm going to twist that together with the wire coming from my light. Use one of our yellow butt connectors here. Now our other wire here will connect to that red side of our orange. All right, now we'll make our connections here. Our red wire, that needs to go to the blue wire from our pigtail we installed. And the white wire, that's going to go to the white wire sides. All right, now we can take a few zip ties, get our wiring tucked up nice and neat. My only recommendation would be from our brake controller plug. If we come straight up towards the steering wheel, there's going to be a little metal bracket with a hole in it. I would zip tie that off there, and then maybe a couple up here a little bit higher, and that should keep our wiring and our signal and everything up out of the way. All right, we've got everything hooked up. Let's test out our system here and make sure it's going to work. What we'll do is just simply pull that breakaway switch out of the front, and we want to see the system activate. We'll want to ensure that it's pulling straight down on our brake pedal, that all of our connection points are holding nice and solid. And we'll also want to be sure when we put our breakaway switch back in that it releases fully. All right, with everything working properly, that's going to complete our installation of the Roadmaster InvisiBrake, the supplemental braking system with part number RM-8700 on our 2011 Chevrolet HHR.
Click the link below to shop, learn more, or visit us at etrailer.com.